detective, cyberpunky, story-based game. Sounds right up my alley.
One more of these, and I'd die.
Observer is a detective slash cyberpunky slash horror game developed by Bloober Team SA, the makers of Layers of Fear. So Observer kind of falls into this same kind of mold. It is a slightly different kind of theme and obviously scenario. In this one you play as Dan Lazowski, or Daniel Lazowski, who is a private investigator and is also known as a observer. He gets a tip off that his son may be involved in a murder case, and he goes off to investigate it to see exactly what happened. Observer is a first-person horror exploration game with detective elements in it, is the best way I could put it. It's very much, again, similar to Layers of Fear, but it's very story-driven. A lot of the things in terms of gameplay are quite basic, so the main kind of part of it is the story and exploring the story and the actual environments around you. First off, I will say that the environments are fantastic. They are really, really good. This whole game mainly takes place, as I said before, in sort of an apartment complex or a block of flats, and it's obviously set in the future. I believe it's 2084 it's set in. So everything is a little bit different and strange, and the apartment complex itself has this grimy, very low budget feel about it, and like a horror film or something in that range. But it's really well detailed, and it's just like interesting to look at. I love games that have levels that are really well crafted, and this one, especially throughout the whole game, is one of those kind of games. So the gimmick with Observer is obviously you play as a private investigator, Dan, who is also known as an observer. And what observers can do is they can hack into people's minds. Most of them dead people, like they can still hack into them when they died, and essentially what you can do as an observer is to see their last memories. And the cool thing about this is it wouldn't be very much of a game or a investigation game if you could just see exactly what people saw. Instead you get a interpretation of what they saw, and this can lead to some really disturbing and really outrageously strange scenes when you hack into people's minds. It's probably the best thing about this game, just experiencing people's last thoughts and then trying to piece together what they actually mean, because it's not as black and white as just hacking into people's minds and seeing like a 10 or 20 second clip, I guess, or cutscene of what they last saw and then trying to piece that together. It is more of the type of that Twin Peaksy kind of strange, The Shining kind of vibe to it, where everything just doesn't make sense if you just look at it initially, but putting it together will eventually lead to the bigger story of everything. In terms of a horror experience, now I'm not the biggest horror fan, mainly because I don't really enjoy them that much because I hate getting jump scares all the time, so I'm a bit of a wuss, but I really, really do enjoy games that are atmospheric, games like Stories Untold or even the Silent Hill games. I absolutely adore those kind of games. With Observer, it does take that path of being atmospheric. It's a psychological kind of horror, more or less, to it. There are jump scares in it, but they're not overloaded like most horror games would be. And that's one of the best things about Observer, is that a lot of the themes and the horror themes and the things that make this game creepy and scary are just the things you see and sometimes the things you don't see. So for example, the actual apartment complex itself is very, very creepy. There's different levels, there's a basement, there's upper floor. It's just creepy to walk around. The other side of it is not seeing things. So you would actually interact with people in the apartment complex, try to ask questions, see what happens, find out who's in each apartment. But the cool thing about it is that you don't actually see these people. You're actually just knocking on doors and visually seeing them through what looks like old technology put on the front of a door. So you get like things like mobile phones, or old mobile phones connected through the doors, and you can see like very distorted pictures of video of repeated video of who essentially is behind the door, and you can just hear their voice. And I think that's really cool because it just adds to that kind of, I guess, feeling alone element in this apartment complex. It does have that kind of loneliness to it when you're there, because there's not many characters you actually bump into. It's more or less up to your own interpretation of what's behind the door, and that to me makes the whole experience a lot more creepier than just showing, oh, here's a character. One of the things I didn't necessarily enjoy, I guess, was there's this gameplay element which I'm still baffled by why it's in the game, but it's there anyway. Essentially, with Dan, the detective you play as, he hacks into people's minds, he has to take medication, basically, because I think it just brings him down to the real world. And the way that you notice this is either by the storyline, by cutscenes saying you need to take your pills, but you can also notice this by graining on the actual screen when he's looking at things, because a lot of this is all, it feels very digitalized, everything, even the setting feels very digitalized, and as you're playing the game, he needs to take these medication pills, and he, for some reason, hasn't got a lot of them to start the game, which is really odd, and even more questionable, he ends up just picking them up as you play throughout the level in people's apartments and stuff. But essentially what these pills are is you take them and the screen becomes less distorted. The problem with this mechanic, and it's not really a problem, it's just I just don't understand why it's there, is that there's so many of these pills lying around that you just never run out of them. And even if you did, you just end up getting a very distorted screen, and that just makes the game frustrating and harder to play, and would just get annoying over time. But it would never got to that case. I actually end up finding loads and never had to worry about that element after, I guess, the first 2 hours of playing this game. And I just don't understand why that's in the game. It seems really odd and bizarre and just unnecessary. I know it adds to the story, I guess, or the character and character building, but as a gameplay mechanic, it just didn't. I just don't understand why it was there. So this mainly is a story-based game. So let's get onto the story. The story itself is solid, and I did enjoy it. There are many moments in this game where I was like, that's pretty cool, or there's just certain scenes that are disturbing because they're just creepy enough to be like, oh, that's really weird, and someone actually came up with this idea for a certain level, and it's just like, oh god, that's just terrifying, in the non-jump scary sort of way. Just the way everything was made and put together is very creepy and disturbing, and I really liked those elements. There's also times in Observer when it gets really annoying. There's times in Observer where, not talking about the pills, but there's times in levels where you have to do stealth, and the stealth in this game, I'm not necessarily saying it was needed. It's there for a purpose, and it's understandable why it's there, but it just doesn't really fit into the game that well. I felt like I was playing a different game as soon as I went into a stealth section. And I understand 100% why it's in there in the game if you understand the story and you're playing along, but it just didn't really, it wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy stealth sections. Not many people enjoy stealth sections, but this one was just felt like it was chucked in there for the reasons of chucking something else in. As well as that, there are some cases of, I kind of wish that the side content of this game was a bit more brought into the main story. And what I mean by that is, you've got the main story, which is this investigation you're trying to do, but there's also emails and things you can pick up in people's apartments complexes that give you an indication of everything outside this apartment block. And the stuff that was in those emails is quite interesting. I think it's just me, I just kind of want to know how this world functions and works, because you only really get the information through there. And I understand that the game developers want you to go down this one path. You know, you're an investigator, you're investigating this thing. Everything in the outside world is should be irrelevant, but you can look at emails, I guess, and newspapers and see if there's something that tickles your interest. But I kind of was hoping that there was like a bit more to do with the outside world instead of just being in one place, and that kind of got annoying, but it wasn't something that was like like I hate this game kind of thing. I enjoyed the setting, and the setting was good. I just kind of wish there was a bit more from the world building in the outside, because I think from reading up on things in the game, from emails and all that kind of stuff, that they could have made something a bit more, I don't know, bigger and probably better in terms of world building. But obviously this isn't the biggest studio in the world, and they have a budget, and they're not going to make like a huge open world game or anything like that. But I just kind of wish that the side content was brought in a little bit more. It just seems like it was pushed aside, when actual facts, some of the stuff in there was quite interesting. I don't know if it's a hit or miss for me as well. Like this game is very hit and miss in places for me. Sometimes I really love it, and sometimes it just doesn't work for me. But the voice acting for the main character, Dan, he's got a very unique voice, let's put it that way. It's very grovelly and very, very unique, and you can distinct it from other kind of characters you probably have heard of and played. But his voice is very grovelly and slow and low, so when it got to scenes where it needed a bit more power and a bit more impact, it just felt like he was a one tone the whole way through. And after a while, there were sometimes I laughed, because it seemed like they wanted, I think from the script, they wanted a bit more like power out of his voice, and it just stayed the same kind of tone throughout the whole thing, which is fine, because the guy who you play as is like middle-aged, probably older than middle-aged, and he probably hasn't got a lot of energy left. But it just felt a bit odd and a bit out of place when all the other characters had a bit more boom to their voice, and the main character you played at was a bit, I don't know, boring sometimes with his voice, and it was just very one tone the whole way through, and sometimes it just didn't work. Sometimes it did, and sometimes it just didn't work. But it's a very unique voice. It doesn't get on your nerves that much, but in some scenes it just kind of was like a bit funny that it seemed like the people who wrote the script for this wanted to get a better voice out of him. I don't know, maybe in some scenes it just seemed like he should have been a bit more emotionally impacted by things, and he just, from the tone of his voice, just really didn't feel like he was. There's obviously going to be puzzle elements or puzzle features in a game like this, a first person story based game. The puzzles were very, very easy. They were just quite straightforward. I didn't have any trouble with them at all. This game is incredibly easy to play. I completed Observer in about 5.5 hours time. I enjoyed my time with it. I felt like the story was solid. I really loved the elements of immersion that was in it, and the horror in it. It was a good horror for me, for someone who doesn't really play horror games. And I love the detail. I absolutely love the detail in this level, despite it being in one place generally, most of the game. The things I didn't like, obviously, were the stealth sections, and I felt like the game just didn't have much of a challenge to it. And in some scenes, it kind of felt like a slog at times as well, which is a little bit annoying. There's just some unnecessary things in the game that I just felt like let it down a bit. But overall, it's a solid story. Wouldn't say it's amazing, because that's mainly what this game is going for, is the story and you to experience it. But I liked other things around it, and some things I didn't. So I'm going to give Observer a 7 out of 10. Thank you very much, guys, for watching my first review on this channel. I really, 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 really have delayed this channel and getting stuff up on it. So I've decided that I'm going to mainly do reviews and just talking to the camera about things. This is my own personal channel. I can do whatever the hell I want on it, pretty much. So what I mean by that is I have a main channel which is called Different Level. We mainly make documentaries about video games on there, so go check that out. Links in the description below. But this channel is pretty much my opinion channel, I guess, or talk to the camera channel. Things could change, you never know, but mainly what I'm going to be focusing on is things I've played, game reviews, and things I can recommend, or talking about games in general and the game industry, I guess, as a whole. So I do hope you enjoy these videos. Let me know if you enjoy these reviews. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.